Let's get this party started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, wow. We have a lot of people coming in. I'm Lisa Schwartz, Chief Experience Officer here at ITSM Academy, and I have my very personal nifty fellow on the call with us, David Cannon. Probably many of you, looking at your names, know darn well who David is. But for those of you who don't, David has been a major contributor to ITIL for 2+ decades. He is an ITIL author, and he is the PeopleCert Chief of America's, King of America, not King.
No kings.
No kings. But David is here to give us some of the background about why we have the Grand Poobah. Exactly. Thank you, Doug. Why it was time for ITIL to evolve. 7 years is a long time, especially in this current world that we live in. The initial feedback from ITIL 5 has been so strong that we're really excited. So Dave's going to talk today about why we had to change, what the change looks like, and then we're going to be answering questions about transition paths for individual learners. So, and I'm going to be hanging out with David and jumping in on a couple slides. I do have to say this. As you can tell visually from our backgrounds, our colors are different. And David and I co-created this deck, mostly David, not taking credit. But it visually is, we didn't have time to mesh it together. So because we thought spending time on real things was more important. But I have to say this, if you're one of those people that glaring PowerPoints get to you, which ironically I am, I apologize. This is not what our courses look like. And David, on that note,
let me share my deck. My deck. Actually, Lisa says that I should take more credit than I deserve because you'll see. Is this the right one? No, this is not the right one. Is it? There it is.
So while you're pulling it up, David, I will say we got preloaded, thank y'all, with a bunch of questions. So when appropriate during the presentation, I might throw some of those in. And I think we have a poll. Let me see. We're gonna have a poll midway through. So, David, if you've got your deck, we're ready to go.
I do have my deck. Can you see it? I should say our deck because you actually played a greater role than you're admitting to. So, yeah, all the bad stuff I created and all the fix-ups responsible for. So,
but I'm not seeing it. Are y'all seeing it?
I'm not sharing. There's I see some thumbs up there.
Okay, great. Sorry. That as usual, that's a Lisa problem.
Hey, thanks, Lisa, for inviting me on this, and thanks everybody for attending. It's really good to see some names that I'm very familiar with and know well. Good to see everybody on the call. So we really just have 3 items on the agenda. We're going to be talking about why we updated ITIL. Cat is out of the bag. This has been in the works for quite some time. Really serious work started about a year ago. And I will tell you, this is probably one of the now I've been through every release from version 2 all the way through to now. And I have to say, this release is one that has probably been the best organized, well coordinated, and I think it's good quality as well. But I'll leave that to you to decide once you've had a chance to kind of see what we've done, and then hopefully get a hold of the materials yourself. But I want to give some insight as to why we did this. It's been 7 years since the last. We don't update these books just because it's 7 years or 8 years or 10 years. It's not a time-based thing. It really is based on how much has changed in the industry. So we're going to look at what those changes are and why now is a really good time. There was some debate about it, as you can imagine, as to whether we should hold off and see what AI is going to do, because it's still anybody's game right now as to what how people are going to use AI and to what extent they're going to use it and how much are they going to automate or not automate, et cetera, et cetera. So there was some debate about should we hold off, and actually I think you'll see that so much has changed that we really do need to update. We're going to spend some time talking about what has changed and then just give an overview of some of the specific publications that are being introduced and the certifications. So that's what it is. And yeah, the cat is out of the bag. As I say, we were working on it for about a year. It was very tightly held because, we just wanted to make sure that we were focused on doing this and doing it right. That said, we did get a lot of input, and I'll talk about that. But here's why. A couple of things that really drove this. The first one is something that was counterintuitive. When we talk about digital technology, we often talk about the collaborative aspects of digital technology. So using things like Zoom and the collaborative document creation and automated, not only supply chains, but value streams and so on, really created this impression that by using digital technology, you would automatically bring the world together. And what we found was actually the reverse. What we found is that organizations or departments or divisions or groups within organizations were asking the question, how can I use technology to be more productive, to do my job better? And they would look for a solution which solved their needs and the world that they understood. So if you're in a manufacturing department, a factory, you would look at how digital technology will support you there. If you're in the marketing department, you would look at digital marketing. If you were in a sales team, you would look at Salesforce automation. And what we found is, because it's pretty cheap to acquire these things, because you're getting them in the cloud, is you were finding that departments were buying the thing that suited them most, investing a huge amount of their time and effort in getting the data, using it, getting everybody familiar with it, in some cases even customizing it and tailoring it. That we found that organizations were starting to fragment because they were so focused on their own specialization. And what made it worse is that all of the hype around data being super portable in the cloud, it isn't. And so, hey, let's just collaborate on getting this product, this new product created, developed, manufactured, and out of the door, and we'll align it across the 5 cloud solutions that we're all using. No, you won't, because it doesn't allow you to do that. And so we found organizations were really starting to fragment and focus in on their specialization. And as a result, duplicating cost, putting in effort. One organization I worked in had 3 CRM systems in the same company, and they needed a data warehouse so they could get the data from all 3 to report on. It's hugely expensive. So we saw that, and we saw just more and more evidence of this. And as you know, ITIL was founded on let's break down some silos. And what we found is that the digital technology has just restored those silos and doubled them because we've now invested so much in them. The second thing that happened, and this happened probably just as gradually, and that is that the decisions around digital technology moved from the IT department into the business. It started with probably before cloud, but really it started to hit the mainstream in cloud. We always used to talk about shadow IT, and it was a bad thing. And now shadow IT is kind of the norm. It's how organizations work. It's like, you need something? Sure. You got a cloud solution for that. You have an AI solution for that. You can cobble something together using vibe code. Whatever you need, you can just do it. And these decisions are being made in business units. The downside of that is that people who are making the decisions and who have to live with the consequences of these decisions don't have the decades of experience of managing technology solutions that we do. So what ends up happening is that the traditional IT skills kind of find themselves in some traditional IT department doing break fix or tech support or security policy enforcement. Like there's so much more that we could be doing to really support these decisions that are being made and the way in which these solutions are being managed. And we've kind of been out of touch with them because it's just moved away from us. Now we have this task of trying to figure out how we get back and integrated back into this decision-making cycle. That's a very difficult task because once you're out of it, it's very difficult to get back in. So again, that's ITIL version 5 is about how you start integrating your core IT disciplines and functions back into the decision making, even if it has been distributed. Lisa, jump in if I'm taking too much time here because, I get excited about this stuff. So,
You are doing fine, my friend.
okay. Here's an interesting point. We noticed back in ITIL 2 to 3, we had players like HP, CA, and so on. The big tech companies and big consulting companies were really driving. I say HP because I was working for them. They were really driving the agenda for ITSM. It's not those companies anymore. And what you found, though, is that a lot of the services provided by those companies are now being provided by very specialized managed service providers. And there are literally thousands of them. Revenue for managed service providers has tripled in the last 5 years. That's just how big the growth is. And so people who should be using ITIL to really support what they do and make sure they're delivering what their customers need, well, then they're not driving it as much. And that's because, again, ITIL wasn't designed around that kind of environment. It didn't really cater towards the very specialized, maybe even sometimes commoditized activities that managed service providers are doing. I mean, for example, it could be something as simple like one that I know that all they do is they purchase, configure, and deliver laptops to schools in a particular school district. And when that equipment has to be retired, they decommission it. That's all they do. And how do you use ITIL in that environment? We think it's pretty important because there are security issues, there are usability issues, there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be managed. How are they doing that? And how are they using a common language between all of the stakeholders in that chain to manage that? So yeah, we're seeing that happening. And we're also seeing IT people in many cases being asked to take on a new skill set, which is contract management, supplier management. And as if that's not bad enough, we're asking them to do it on a flexible basis. So we're asking them to become familiar with things like dynamic contracting, where you can scale up and down depending on real-time demand. This is a new skill set that we have to learn. Now the last one, and I think this was the final driver, the thing that really brought it home. It wasn't the fact that AI and what it was doing and the risks that were associated with AI. I mean, that was important. More than that, though, what it did is it shortened and repositioned the development and operation cycles. And in fact, to the extent made the words development and operation almost irrelevant. Even as we move through DevOps, where you have the infinity glass from or infinity curves from dev into ops and then back again, and it's nice and sequential and linear and very agile. Even that has been turned on its head, where those two loops have now kind of been pulled under each other, and they're happening at the same time. And very often they're being run by the same teams, but with two different, very, very different objectives. It's no longer, nice and neat and linear. Who would have thought we would think of DevOps as linear? But that's what AI makes it look like, right? Makes it look like it's linear because it is just so fast and everything is happening at the same time. We had to be able to figure out how to get those life cycles aligned. And the word life cycle, you'll see one of the big changes we really recognized that the lack of a life cycle in ITIL 4 was an issue. And we've brought the life cycle back. We've made it larger than ITIL version 3, which had 5 stages. We now have 8. But the life cycle becomes so important because people need to know what needs to be done and when, especially when you have multiple players along, working together. So there you go. That kind of sets the stage for what comes next. Lisa, I'm going to just pause so I can take a sip of water. But
You're allowed.
yeah,
Yep.
that
You're
means jump
allowed.
in and take over.
So I'm trying to get back to it. So, Dave, why don't we flip to the next slide and we can tell
Yeah,
people
okay.
about our conversation.
Yeah, this is a cool one.
Yeah. So this is I made it because for those of you that know me, you know that doing visual things like Flossie the cat brings me some joy. So I made a little logo for this morning ABC company because it is a real company. It's just a fake name. So David and I were talking about one of the Academy's enterprise accounts and in my experience in the world of V2, so the Academy started in the very, very early days of V2 foundation training here in North America. A lot of the organizations that we worked with were identifying themselves as an ITIL shop, a couple of years into it. And people were, and people would use that turn of phrase all the time. We're an ITIL shop. And in V3, we saw that as well. In V4, and I think no shade on V4, it brought good value to a lot of organizations, but in my opinion, it didn't perhaps bring as much value to organizations as V2 and V3 did. And there were some of the concepts in 4 that I think organizations struggled with adopting, adapting, and making it their own. And we've already seen with the announcement of V5, and people have been diving deep into the information that PeopleCert has provided, the stuff that we've provided, and I'm sure many others. There's already ding, I get it. I can see how this is what our enterprise, our organization needs right now. And so David and I were talking about that natural progression from, I have a typo on the slide. I'm so sorry. Stabilization is V1. I blame David for not picking up on
It's
that.
my fault. It is my fault.
So David, why
Yeah.
don't you talk us through the
Yeah.
labels that we assign to these?
So yeah, this is based on, ITIL calls itself a best practice. And what best practice doesn't mean it's the best possible thing you could ever do in your life. What it means is it's what has been working for a vast majority of organizations in the industry at a particular time. So in the first version, well, it was a best practice to see what good practice was, what worked well in the UK government. And it was all about, we got great applications, but we have our operations keep failing us because it's not available when it needs to be. It's slow. It breaks and this kind of thing. And so one of the biggest issues in version 1 was it was so painful. Let's stabilize the environment. No, of course, there was a lot more behind it, but essentially people use it to get stability. So predictability, that was what it was. And that was the challenge they were fighting. It was fairly straightforward looking back because it was all mainframes. There were a couple of mid-range distributed computers, but then along comes a client server, and client server introduces a level of complexity into the environment, and we have to figure out how we apply the disciplines that we learned in mainframe into this client server environment, and so control becomes an issue. How do we prevent this from becoming the Wild West so that we can continue to provide predictable, consistent, good quality services? So that was V2, and then ITIL V3 was all about how to achieve alignment. And so in version 2, there was a lot of talk about quality services, like how do we make sure our services are consistent? What we didn't really ask, we thought we asked, but we didn't, was when we're consistent and we're 99.99% available, is the business getting what it needs? And the reverse was also true. When the business asks us to do something and tells us that they're the customer, therefore we don't ask why, we just jump, do they really need it? Do they know what they're asking for? Do they understand the consequences of what they're asking for? Do they understand that certain things are possible and certain things are not possible? Do they know that by investing this money in whatever they're asking for, that there is going to be an expectation to show that there's a return on that investment? How do we help them to make those decisions? So that alignment was all about, making sure that when we're delivering services, we're delivering things that are genuinely needed and that will make an impact on the organization. And if you look at version 1, 2, and 3, they have one thing in common, and that is that they were written for a centralized IT department, single service provider environment. In some organizations, they had multiple service providers, but even those were generally coordinated through the IT department. It's then that everything started to go off the rails. I remember in the end of ITIL version 3, we were writing, and somebody said, "Why haven't you got cloud in there?" This was in 2010. "Why haven't you got cloud in there?" And the answer was, "Well, tell us what to write because it's too new. We know some organizations are using it. Tell you what, let's put an appendix at the back and you can still read it if you've got those books." For us, what cloud meant, because we're a bunch of IT people in a centralized IT department, this is a really cost-effective and quick way of provisioning infrastructure. You can ramp a server up in less than 3 seconds, as opposed to 6 weeks to order, unbox, rack, configure, etc. Now you can do it using containers and it's within 3 seconds. So this is a really good cost-effective way of being able to do what we did. And that's how we started thinking about cloud in version 3, because we're a bunch of centralized IT people providing services. We kind of saw, but we didn't know how serious it was, that the business users were going to start buying cloud solutions without consulting the IT department. So, for example, in the early days when Salesforce was selling their solution, they never sold to the CIO. They sold to the chief revenue officer, the chief sales officer, or the sales director. That's who their customer was. And they managed to convince them that not only was it great functionality, but it would work even better if you kept IT away from it. I'm exaggerating, but yeah, it's like you don't need your CIO to make this decision.
But
There's
not
no
by much,
IT
David.
involved. No, not by much. It's like there's no IT involved in this. All you need is network access. The rest we'll take care of. And
It's
actually, people fell
vanilla,
for
out
this,
of the
right?
box.
Yeah. Um, yes, some good questions coming in. I'm going to come back to
Mhm.
that AI one in a bit because that's a cool one. So,
I'm building a pool of questions for you, David, because we
oh,
had a lot
great,
of
thank you.
pre-questions. And I just have to quickly say the nines conversation, I'd forgotten how much of my life I have spent in V3 days in that era answering that question. And it also made me think of the federated CMDB. Remember when that's all anyone could talk about?
Yeah, federated CMDB. I wish, CMDB. I wish that I hear this today. We're getting a CMDB. Like, really? Tell me what that looks like. It's still a very contentious issue. We're going to talk about, well, maybe not on this call, but it's really interesting because, well, we'll go down this tangent a little bit. A CMDB says, what do you need to know to manage your services? That's what a CMDB is. You can imagine that your back in those days, HP OpenView was part of your CMDB, right? SolarWinds, part of your CMDB. Your security monitoring tools, part of your CMDB. Well, how do you pull that all together, right? How do you even think about a CMDB in terms of a physical database that stores all of that information? You can't. So anyway, that's a whole different discussion. But it does bring to mind this idea that is stressed again in 4 and now ITIL version 5 is that if you want to manage your technology investment in your organization, you kind of have to know where the decisions are being made and what people are doing with that technology. So one of the key dependencies on this is being able to map, who's doing what with technology in the organization. Now, it doesn't have to be done in a centralized way. It all depends on the governance in the organization, but you need to be able to do that. That's never not been a requirement for service and now product management. And that's what's happening in 4. In 4, we recognize that the whole thing is as decentralized. We have these decisions moving out into the business cloud, entering in the organization, applications being built all throughout the organization, some supported by IT, others not. The result of that for many organizations, and we didn't see it, was like the frog in the water. The water started getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Now suddenly, 15 years later, we're realizing that the water boiled. And what I mean by that is we saw the role of the traditional IT department getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. We saw the definition of what a service manager does shrink. So whereas we were responsible for informing and participating in all major technology decisions in the organization, today we find in some organizations the only thing we're doing is tech support. All the decisions have been made. We're providing shared services, which are all standardized, and we're supporting the technology, the end user devices that support that technology, and the network. And yes, we're doing a bit of security as well, as far as we can get control of that. Now, again, I may be exaggerating a bit for effect, but I think not by much. And if we look at the tools that are being developed today, when we talk about ITSM tools, what do we mean? And it infuriates me. It's a person with a headset and a speaker. That's all ITSM is. Tech support and the service desk. Where has all of that enabling of value, that scouring the technology environment to make sure that our organization is getting what it needs to be valuable? That's happening somewhere else. So the whole point of version 4 was to recognize that this is happening, to put in place some way of thinking about it. But when I look back at ITIL 4, I think it recognized the problem. It articulated some aspects of the solution, but it really didn't bring it home. And this is where version 5 comes in. So AI coming along, forced the issue. Yeah.
Are we getting us some questions? So I'm going to move you along because you could talk about it all day, and we're already halfway done, and we barely started.
All right.
So we got to.
So this is where we are, right? Now, do you want me to pause for questions, or should we just move on to the next?
No, I think at this point, let's keep moving on. I know there's a couple more
We'll come back.
Points, and a lot of the questions are about stuff toward the end of the deck.
So here's some a key factor of what has led to this change. So in ITIL version 3, this is how we thought about value, right? We're an IT department, we're providing services to business units. Business units take those services and they do something that then enables them to deliver a product or services to their customers. It's easy to create value because we say we create value. What that means is we spent the money. The sales team and the business units sell a product or services to the external customers. So they get something that's of value to them. And in a commercial organization, they pay for it. And that's when the value gets realized. Pretty simple. In version 3, all you had to do was tie those 3 things together. How much did you spend? How much did you get? What's the difference? And that's your value. And you can then use that to prove the value of your IT services. When you distribute the management and of technology, this is what happens. You have an organization in which you have multiple organization units, all of whom have some technology expertise. So the blue in this is technology expertise. The salmon is, I'm going to call that salmon. The salmon is business operations experience. So like I'm an HR department, I know how to run HR. Marketing department, here they are. This is the marketing department, heavily digitized. So they have a lot of marketing experience, but they also have a lot of technology experience. This is probably your old IT department on the left there. Now, how do you define value when the technology solutions are spread across all of those divisions? And the way to do it is going back to something that came out of Lean, which is value streams. The only difference here between us and Lean is that the goal here is not to create efficiency. The goal here is to track value from start to end. So sometimes we equate this to one plus value stream plus one. So what happens before the value stream or what happens after the value stream. But the point here is that the value stream enables us to align and orchestrate all of these activities that are happening with technology through the organization. Because the technology is changing so quickly, you'll find you may not have the expertise in-house, so you're going to have to work with partners. These are different than vendors. Vendors give you stuff. These partners have knowledge and skills, and they work side by side with you almost as employees. We still have the processes or our practices that are in place. They're still there. They still work. It's interesting to note that not many of the processes have changed from version 1. They've been updated to account for more modern working methods, but there's some principles that just don't change. Stuff breaks, you got to fix it. Incident management, make sure your changes are going to work before you kind of deploy them. You can do it quickly, but you better make sure they work. Change enablement. So these building blocks are all still there, and they're still there in this model. We now have a new type of vendor, which is a commodity supplier. That's the person that gives you stuff that, is just off the shelf. I'm sorry. And that's how we calculate value in ITIL 4. And this same model moves forward into ITIL version 5 with a little bit more sophistication. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Anything to add there, Lisa?
No, sir. I think, and if you guys have any questions specific to that, throw them in right now.
Okay.
And I think we're trying to jam a lot of information into a quick. So, David, while you're doing the next slide, I'm just going to throw up a real easy poll just to keep us moving.
Great.
So you know.
So, poll is coming. While it's coming, I'm going to introduce you to the first major change that happened. Very often we talk about dev or application development, and we talk about IT operations. There you go. The poll is up. Please just take a moment to complete that. I can even answer this one. And you're going to say, yeah, that's easy. You're an ITIL master. No, I'm actually not. And the reason for that is because I could not take exams of books that I'd written. So I'm not a master.
No, you're a Yoda.
Yeah,
Obi-Wan to the masters.
No. So
all right. I think, I think you're good to keep going.
Good. So the major addition here is this definition of a product and a service that we're moving with. We introduced it in ITIL 4, but here we're really coming out and putting some structure behind it. This idea that when you are managing technology, you are managing both products and services. Yes, we can talk about service management and ITSM, but actually we recognize that you have to manage both, and you have to manage them both at the same time. This is not about application development and operations. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying there are products, and the cycle and activities involved in building and deploying and using products is related to, but not the same as, the cycle of managing services. So we need to define what those cycles are and how they fit together. And that's exactly what we've done. We recognize here that, we have taken for granted in previous versions of ITIL. We just talk about IT service management. We take for granted that people know that there are products embedded in there, but we've never really said it, and we haven't given any guidance about that. And so now we have this. And going on to the next slide, this is the life cycle. Yeah, we've got it in two forms here. one that you can read and the other one with the fancy yin and yang to show that we have the product and the service lifecycle kind of integrated. But let me go, I'm not going to cover this in detail. The point that I want to make here is that there are now 8 stages in the life cycle. Each of those stages has a set of activities associated with it, and those activities are supported by the practices. So you want to look at incident management, it's very likely to support the activities in operate, deliver, and support. Whereas things like capacity, availability, and service level management are likely to be very active in design, acquire, build, and transition. So you'll see different practices working in different ways through the life cycle, and we provide guidance on how that happens. But the really cool thing about this life cycle is you can pull it apart and you can assign stages of the life cycle to particular groups or companies. Remember the school district MSP that we spoke about? Tell you what, they're not going to be interested in the design. They do some acquire, but really after the fact, they're really just operating, delivering, and supporting. The schools will give them the requirements. They'll give them the specs. They'll tell them what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. And we just need to make sure we're focusing on these 3 over here. But we have to make sure that we're integrated into what came before and what happens afterwards. So there's like a shared responsibility model happening over here, to move back to what we learned from the cloud. And this is a particularly strong thing. Now, you're going to have organizations that want to manage the full life cycle for everything. You're going to have the small organization that just is going to do 3 things. And that's all that they want to be doing. We actually provide a way for them to be able to do that. You'll see this here in the value chain. This still sits within the service value system. So we still have this as the center of the value, except now we've turned it into a very a building block approach where you get to choose which components need to fit in your value chain, which will help you move from opportunity to how you achieve the value or the outcome that your customer is looking for. So that makes it a lot easier to explain than the kind of 3D boxes that were in the middle of the SVC, the service value system. This is a lot more straightforward. In addition, some of you may recognize this. Those of you who went through the DSV course, Drive Stakeholder Value course, will recognize this. It was never in the foundation. It has been moved into it is now a foundational concept. The fact that when you are working across an organization or between organizations, you engage in a journey together. And that journey has very specific activities and responsibilities associated with it. One thing I'm not showing here is the responsibilities that are assigned to the different sides of this. That I, as a user or customer, have responsibilities in making sure that that service works and meets my needs. I, as a service provider, have a responsibility to make sure that I am offering you and giving you what it is that you need to be successful. So there are responsibilities built into this as well. So we're moving that whole concept of service journeys and how we integrate product and service together right from the very beginning in the foundation. Here's one of my favorites. Service level management was my starting point in ITIL. It was the piece that made most sense to me. And the reason it made sense to me was because I was a system manager working in a regional environment, and I had to do everything from A to Z. And I spent so much time running around like a chicken with its head cut off. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was always getting it wrong. My users were never happy with what I did. I was working so hard. When I read this book, I realized I'd never actually done one thing, and that is sit down with those users and ask them exactly what they do with the system and what they need and when they need it. My workload went down to 25% of what it was after I had that discussion. And my customer satisfaction level went up by about 300%. And all I was doing was focusing on those first 2, utility and warranty, and we didn't even call it back in ITIL version 1. It's just like, okay, so what do you need us to do, and what do you need, and how do you need it to perform? Now, of course, in version 3, we introduced utility and warranty, because that's what that is. What do you need the service to do? How do you need it to perform? The thing I really like about this, and I'm going to get onto the next two pieces, the thing I really like about this is it reinforces this concept as something that happens beyond the how long have I got to fix an incident realm, right? Which is what most ITSM applications are using. SLA equals you've got 4 hours to fix the incident. Nothing to do with the service design, nothing to do with the quality of service, how the user is using the service. It doesn't even come into the discussion about SLA. So we've had to add this concept of excellent experience level agreements, experience level management to kind of compensate for that. In ITIL, we recognize we don't see them as separate. They may actually be separated, but we see that whole process as being an integrated process. So utility, warranty, experience are really part of the same package that we have to build and deliver. And so we've recognized that. And again, shout out to the XLM team. Lisa, I know you were very involved in that and probably still are for bringing that really home and making it a key part of what we need to focus on. Again, it was always assumed that people would do this, but
no.
Yeah.
Well, so Emilio has a question about this slide. He just would like for you to elaborate on sustainability.
Yeah, sustainability is a good one. This was added in because of the of so much of the culture of organizations changing. To be aware of issues like social responsibility, green, environmental responsibility, the responsibility to offer services that don't just hit the bottom line, but also create quality of life and employee satisfaction, and recognize that diversity is healthy and should be reinforced in some way. And so the sustainability components have to do with how we make sure that these services, number one, meet the needs at multiple levels, but number two, that service will continue to be valid over a longer period of time because it is able to take into account these dynamic, soft factors in the organization. So, you can read that as narrow as you like or as broad as you like. In a narrow way, you can say, well, it just means that we're going to tell you how we're going to dispose of the equipment once you're done with it, so that it's done in an environmentally conscious way. You can look at it as broad as you like to say, well, we're going to make sure that every service level agreement reinforces the social responsibility, the environmental responsibility policies of our company.
So apparently this is the first time David or I have ever done a presentation because we have a bunch of slides and we have less than 20 minutes, 40 minutes worth of questions and 6 more slides to do. So David, we got to go.
Oh, okay, there we go. This one is easy. Guiding principles are all still there. Nothing changed there. But what we have done, which is really cool, is everybody said, great, you're telling me to focus on value. I get it. But how do I do that? And then you would answer them and you'd realize it's not that intuitive. So we actually put some guidelines together. For every one of the guiding principles, you will find a chart like this, which says, here are some things you can do to apply the guiding principle, which for me is really helpful because I thought I understood them. But when somebody asked me to explain them, I'm like, yeah, not that easy, is it? Yeah. And then finally, AI becomes really important. Now, what we've done, this is, I think, the European Union view of what AI is used for. The idea here is that ITIL needs to be able to support these uses, and it needs to do it in a way that is responsible and sustainable, so that we do not have organizations doing weird things or organizations being exposed because poor use of data, et cetera, et cetera. So there is and I know there are questions about AI, so I'm going to leave that until the questions. Just to wrap it up, here is a summary of some of the main changes. You get the deck, so I've included some diagrams here that we didn't cover. That way you get them all. And then finally, and don't pay any attention to the detail, all I want to say here is that we are spending a lot of time integrating ITIL across to Prince2 as well as DevOps. and the DevOps Institute material. That's not what we're limiting it to. You will see additional framework mappings coming out over the coming year. Now let's talk about certification, then we'll go to questions. Here's the new certification scheme. Isn't it beautiful? Well, yeah. Okay, let me break it down. The same 3 parts that we had before. ITIL Practice Manager, Managing Professional, Strategic Leader. It's exactly the same. What's different is what's underneath. Now, in the case of practice, nothing has changed. Oh, you didn't update the practices to ITIL v5? No, we didn't. Why not? Well, because we updated them just under a year ago. They are continually updated. They live online, which is why we don't sell the printed guides. They live online, and they're continually growing. The exams get adjusted as major changes happen. We do not need major version every time we update a sentence in a practice guide. So the practice guides are exactly the same. There is no change to these 3 courses over here. They're exactly the same. If you have already qualified on one of these 3, you're already ITIL 5 certified. Isn't that great? However, if you are an ITIL practice manager today, there is a piece that's missing, because one of the criticisms of ITIL has been it's not practical enough. You don't tell us how to do it. So we wrote a book which says, here's how you do stuff. It's not how do you implement ITIL, by the way. It's how do you use ITIL to make transformative changes. And that's called ITIL Transformation. That book becomes a prerequisite for any higher level designation. So you have to not only have the theory underneath, but you also have to have that layer of practical application that goes with it if you want to get that designation. So if you are an ITIL 4 practice manager, the one thing you'll need to do to update over time, it's not urgent, is to take the ITIL Transformation course at some point. Right? There is no rush to do it. This is not expiring. You don't have to worry about your designations going out of date, right? It's there. The big change comes in that middle layer, because HVIT, CDS, DSV, and DPI are going away. They will go away a year after after the new ones are released, and they're being replaced. But it's not a one-to-one replacement, because now we're looking at ITIL Product Management, ITIL Service Management, and ITIL Experience Management. They do contain about 60% of what was in those other 4 books, but they've been restructured and updated and additional materials added. So if you are an ITIL managing professional and you want to move to ITIL version 5, you're going to have to take a bridge, unfortunately, or fortunately, to enable you to do that. The bridge consists of 2 parts, and you do it all at once, so don't worry. 2 parts. One is, what's the difference between what I learned in ITIL 4 and what's in version 5? And then the second part is ITIL Transformation. And it's all offered as one single exam, and you then update your ITIL Managing Professional to version 5. Strategic Leader, there is no DPI. DPI is now gone, and so ITIL Transformation is the one that you'll need to take, and the ITIL Strategy book. There is no bridge for strategy. So you don't have to do a bridge for strategy and then transform. All you have to do is, if you've got DITS, take the ITIL Transformation. If you are an ITIL master, you do the same as a managing professional. You take the managing professional bridge, because that's the piece that's changed. So it'll tell you the update of product, service, experience, and it'll give you ITIL Transformation.
David, why don't you, if you would pop to the next slide, because we have this sort of mapped out. Go to the next, and then we'll go back to that one. Yeah. So this is if you're V3, and this again is in the deck. It's also in the intro deck that we've got available. But here's your path for 3. Go up one side, please, David. Here's your path for 4. There will be an ITIL Foundation Bridge course. The exam is being released the same day as the syllabus, because we're all doing things quickly. ITSM Academy will be putting up Foundation Bridge on our public schedule. Lots of people have asked that, so I wanted to say that. But anyway, you guys will be able to use these sides, identify where you are and where you need to go. And of course, I'm always here. We're always here to assist with questions. And then, David, if you can go back up one. So this is I sort of put this one together almost for me based on something that people sort of put together. But it's, if you're trying to figure out where do we want to start, particularly for an enterprise or for yourself, I think this slide gives you, hopefully, what you guys will find some pretty good guidance. So any thoughts on any one of those before I keep driving us to questions?
No, I think there's already a couple of questions around the bridge. If you're a strategic leader and a managing professional, you only have to take the bridge, which includes the foundation, the transformation.
So David, Shelley's asking a question that I think I know the answer to, but I don't want to misspeak. So if your V4 certification has expired, in terms of you can't apply CPDs to it, you can still take the advanced.
Yes, you can. Yes,
because
you
can. Your cert is still valid. It's just your it's your continuing professional development program.
Correct.
Yay, indeed.
I want to clarify something about these expiry dates. This is not to force you to repurchase a certificate. What this does is it communicates to a potential employer how recent your qualification is. If you have done nothing with ITIL in 10 years, you're probably not up to speed with the latest developments, right? So the expiry date is there simply to communicate what the status of your, of your professional development is. It is not there to penalize you for not taking exams. So if you have an expired certificate, it will be honored. You will be able to move into the scheme. Now, you may find that some people take a stricter, like you may call customer service, and maybe that message didn't get through to that individual. If that happens, you please get a hold of Lisa. No, don't get a hold of her. Get a hold of me, and we'll take care of it. So please understand that, things sometimes don't get communicated very clearly, and it is pretty confusing. But that is one thing I can assure you, that if you have an expired certificate, it will be honored so that you can upgrade. One other thing I want to mention, it is not mandatory to get an ITIL 5 bridge. The ITIL 4 foundation that you have, I'm talking about ITIL 4 foundation bridge. The ITIL 4 foundation certificate that you have will qualify you to get to any of the upper level courses. So.
Okay. So I know we're jumping around a little bit. I'm trying to squish in as much as I can. So Emil asked the question about, there was a life cycle model in 3. Is there a particular reason to move back to it to move back to that particular term in favor of the service value chain?
The service, yes, there is a reason for it, and I had to struggle with this myself. So I had to ask that question again, because you're talking about a service value chain that is very different to a service and product life cycle. The service and product life cycle is the typical or the overarching sequence in which things must happen for services and products to be effectively developed and used within the organization. The service value chain is how you apply that life cycle. Right. So the life cycle is really an architectural concept. It tells you the sequence. It tells you how things flow. It gives you a way in which you can architect. But the service value chain takes those life cycle phases and it says, this is how we're going to do build in our organization. And when you've done build in your organization, here's how you communicate to the next stage, which may be transition or deploy. And that's how we do it there. And so that's the difference. They have to be the same, because if they were different, you would struggle to map one to the other. You can't have a life cycle with different names to your value chain, because they need to be consistent with each other.
So Mike Parks has a question, and Mike, I'm just saying to you, the question is, we're not going to answer it. I'm going to answer it after the webinar. But he was looking for a detailed ITIL 5 service lifecycle model. So, Mike, I will get that to you probably on Monday, to be honest. We have questions around the AI governance expansion. It's kind of
yes.
Emil is saying it's sort of awkwardly separate from the rest, and that is that concept of extension models. So quickly, David, sorry, if you can explain the extension models, what we have today and what we're going to see coming forward.
Right. So the extension modules you have today, those books will continue to exist, but there's no new exam or anything planned for those. The extension module that we're planning to build is the AI extension modules, and it is specifically around AI governance. ITIL is meant to be applicable, universally applicable across any kind of digital technology. AI is a very specific type of digital technology, and we typically don't write to specific types of digital technology. But in this case, it is so big that we need to address the governance issues behind it. And so we've created an extension module for that. It is not mandatory, and it sits alongside ITIL. Now, I will also say that there is a huge amount of AI information in the ITIL guides themselves, but they tend to be related to that specific part or publication in the books. So whereas the AI governance is specifically around how do you govern AI within the organization, separately to what you, or maybe in addition to what you do as part of your service and product management activities.
So Paul was looking for, hey, Paul, by the way, Paul's looking for some clarity. So this is going back to the previous question. They're these two metaphors, the SVC and the life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Still exist. They still exist, but the service value chain has now been made much more intuitive and practical. You still need governance, you still need guiding principles, you still need improvement, you still need practices, right?
We don't need that stick in governance. So Emil's got a big question, which I'm going to condense to, he's saying that he feels like these days it's not too bright for methodologies, frameworks, etc. Although he does feel that ITIL gets more flack than some of the others, as business seem to be moving away completely from IT and AI governance and viewing it as a hindrance, particularly to operations. Yeah. I feel like David really did speak to that, and I know that question came in when he was talking about it. So, Emil, if you're still unsure about that, can you let me know? And curious about the aspects current ITIL practitioners should be aware of in 5. And this was a free question, but I think it is a really interesting question. What are the 3 most important things people should take from today, David?
I think the return to service and product management to the full life cycle, and not just focusing on the support aspects. I think is probably the single most important thing. Second most important thing is the need to have this kind of capability throughout the organization and not just within a centralized IT group. That we need to find ways of educating any leader in the organization who is responsible and or accountable for digital technology decisions. I think is very important. This is not just a traditional IT thing. And then I think just again, the third thing would be this idea that products and services are both critical. It's not just service management, it's not just product management. You really have to find a way. And product management does not replace DevOps. DevOps is still a very strong and very important set of approaches and culture within the organization. DevOps can absolutely continue to grow and be used in this. But this product and service integration helps to map what's happening more holistically across all of these different approaches.
So Watch this, y'all. Uh, Matt is asking about, and this seems to be like a rumor that's going around. Did they pull the ITIL 4 practices out of ITIL 5? But before I let you answer that, David, I'm going to say, Chris Codwell, if we didn't give you enough whys today, reach out to me. Jason Page, that's such a great question. What I'm saying is you, David, and I should jump on a call together and expand on that.
Yeah.
I think we covered the certification path. I think we got this one. Okay. So again, if we didn't get to your question, I really apologize. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. And David, going back to, let's squash that rumor about that practices and processes are gone from ITIL 5, please. I
Absolutely.
think that's a great place to close.
They are, just as important, if not more than ever before. You do not bring a service value chain or a service value system to life. You do not get to do anything of this unless you are deploying and using those practices in real life. The only thing that was dropped in version 4 was the fact that they were not examinable in the beginning. They were there, they just weren't examinable. So nobody paid attention to them. We then made them examinable, but by then the kind of perception had set in. They are absolutely front and center in this. It's right at the first, as you're moving left to right, they're right there. I would like to see more practices being added in there. That may come.
So we are at time. I want to say that March webinar has become very clear to me, whether it works with David's schedule or we'll do it with some of our team. But what we want to do March 19th, 11, we always do them third Thursday. We're going to do the why. We're going to present what's in it for me in terms of ITIL 5. And I'll figure out who's going to co-present that with me, but I can promise you. So for all of the questions we didn't get to, we're going to pull through those questions and create a deck. How's that sound like? A good solution, right?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
And we'll get answers to you after this. I'm even committing myself to write some of those answers.
Okay, you
If
heard
you'll
it
let
here,
me.
folks.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much for joining us. David's got a really tight schedule today. So we are, let's see, you got time for one more or not really?
Yeah, you want more?
Okay,
I don't, but it's you guys. Where else am I?
No, you've got a commitment. I don't want to make you late. We appreciate you, David, so much. Thank you for
No,
our
thank you.
long time relationship and being such a
Absolutely.
great partner advocate for us. We very much appreciate you. Yes, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll do our best to get this recording up to the YouTube channel as quickly as possible, and we will alert you guys when it is there. And you'll be getting next week an invitation for what's in it for me, ITIL 5, because that's what I'm calling it.
Brilliant. Thank
All
you
right.
so much, Lisa, and everybody.
Yes. Thank you all. Thanks for joining.